Welcome back. You're still watching Newsfeed AM with myself, Naledi Moleo. So the Independent Electoral Commission of South Africa is calling on the Electoral Court to decline Umkhonto weSizwe Party's withdrawal of the legal bid to the 29th of May election outcomes, having that set aside. The MK party claimed that the elections were not free and fair and alleged to have evidence to prove the polls were rigged, but withdrew this bid this week. The Electoral Commission wants the matter to be heard and tested as it believes the allegations were serious and potentially harmful to its integrity. But for more on this, we speak to Legal Director at the Institute for Election Management Services in Africa, Nkululeko Tselane. Nkululeko, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to start with this, right? We hear this week that the MK party is withdrawing its application at the Electoral Court in its challenge of the election results. What was your initial thought when you heard those news?
Good morning and good morning to the viewers. So when I first heard that the MK party was withdrawing the matter, I felt it was predictable, in that the MK party in their initial application didn't follow any of the court rules. As much as people say that there are technical issues, it's not technical issues. Those are very important procedural issues. But even over and above that, in the initial application, the MK party didn't provide any substantive proof to prove that the elections were not free and fair. So once the IEC presented a very good answering affidavit, in which it pointed out all of these flaws and defects, it was really the natural conclusion for the MK party to want to withdraw the matter instead of having to lose in court.
Can we talk about the legal process that the MK party then should have followed? Because there was that replying affidavit, or the affidavit rather, by the IEC, and then there was the expected affidavit from the MK, right? And that essentially not arriving. Does that speak to a lack of preparation from the side of the party, in your view?
Look, I don't know why they wouldn't have followed the Electoral Court rules. So the first issue that was raised, and correctly so, is that in terms of the Electoral Commission Act, matters that are brought before the Electoral Court are inherently urgent. So that means they have to be dealt with urgently and have to be brought within 3 days from the announcement of the election results, which wasn't done. Now, the Electoral Court can still condone that late filing of the papers, but there has to be an explanation as to why they didn't follow the Electoral Court rules, which they didn't. Yeah. And then there are a number of issues that the application wasn't served on all of the parties. The application didn't correctly cite the law that they want to rely on, and so it was, to be quite honest, it was doomed from the beginning as a very poorly done application. And I think for candidate attorneys that are still learning the legal profession, it's a very good example of how not to conduct a litigious matter.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting, because then what you've got now is the response from the IEC essentially saying that they would like to actually see the Electoral Court see the matter to fruition. Why would this be, in your view, an important step for the IEC to take?
So in this matter, we have to remember that it's not strictly legal. It's both legal and it's also political in the sense that it affects the democracy. So when it comes to the freeness and the fairness of the election, it's not enough for an election just to be free and fair. It must be perceived to be free and fair by the general public. So there must be public confidence that the electoral processes and the democracy are above board. Now, it's important for the Electoral Commission to want to say this finalized and taken to its logical conclusion, because a lot of allegations have been laid against the Electoral Commission, and a lot of allegations have been laid against the freeness and fairness of the election. So the Electoral Commission is of a duty to make sure that these matters are ventilated in a public forum, which is the Electoral Court. And then once again, then the public is able to then make a determination whether any of these allegations have any substance to it. So it's very important for the IEC to take it to the Electoral Court and want this matter to be finalized for the public perception elements.
Yeah, and if we talk about public perceptions, I mean, it's difficult not to look at what is being said here. You've got the party, for instance, the MK party, is saying that the IEC is a newfound ally, and I use the words of Ndlela here. The DA filed answering affidavits from which it is clear that the IEC wishes to have the matter dismissed as urgently as it declared the results based largely on technicalities. So, I mean, that's an interesting one, because here we're talking about essentially the MK party saying, well, the public perception is that the IEC wanted to see the matter dismissed. What do you say to that?
The IEC wanted to see the matter dismissed, not to see the matter withdrawn. So when you withdraw a matter, you're not necessarily, you're saying that we can come back and deal with this at a later stage, which they can't because they would be completely out of time in terms of the Electoral Court. So the IEC wants it dismissed, correctly so, as they are defending the matter, but they do not want it to be withdrawn. So there's a big difference, and the Democratic Alliance is allowed to intervene because they're one of the parties that the application was served on. Even so, if I recall correctly, the application was served on all of the parties represented in the National Assembly. However, one of the problems that came up is that since it also wanted to declare the provincial elections as null and void because they weren't free and fair, it was also supposed to be served on the National Council of Provinces and all the provincial legislatures, which wasn't done. So it's allowed in terms of the law and in terms of the processes.
Yeah. Well, what would happen now? So if the IEC, for instance, says that they want to see the matter in the Electoral Court to fruition, what would, let's talk about the legal process that then needs to follow and the role that the MK party would then play in the legal process after they have withdrawn the matter.
Well, the matter is not withdrawn until the court accepts its withdrawal. So the legal representatives of the MK party would be obliged, with the court's directions, to then go and argue the matter in court, as they are the ones that brought the matter, and they should have brought a matter that was properly set out. So what would happen is that the matter would be set down, and we would expect to see whatever arguments arisen or can be brought forward. But what's also important is that in legal matters, we should remember that litigation is not cheap. It's very expensive. Lawyers are expensive. So what would also probably happen is that the IEC would probably request a costs order against the MK party for having had to incur legal costs. Ordinarily, the Electoral Court does not award costs. I think it's developed that practice just in the nature of our democracy and in terms of access to justice. But if the IEC can bring the argument that this was a vexatious litigation with no prospects of success, purely for the purposes of discrediting the electoral outcome, then I wouldn't be surprised if the Electoral Court would deviate from its developed practice of awarding costs.
Yeah, I'm going to move towards wrapping it up, but I think that just as we close this off, Nkululeko, I'm really keen to hear from you if you think that certainly the process and some of the utterances by the MK party have in any way dented the reputation of the IEC. I mean, the party claimed that it even had evidence that the poll was rigged. Those are big claims, and of course the evidence needs to be seen. What has this done, if at all, to the reputation of the IEC in this 2024 election?
So, as we all know, this was a very difficult election for the IEC. There were a number of matters where the IEC could have done a lot better than it did, but that's just a part of the difficulty of running such a complex exercise as a national election. So, over and above those issues, there were a lot of allegations raised against the IEC, and the IEC has to protect its credibility, and it has to maintain public confidence in its ability to run the elections freely and fairly. More so, as we will continue to have elections, we will continue to have a very contested space. We know that in 2026 we have the local government elections, so it's very important for the IEC to defend itself in a public platform. It's very important for the IEC to really regain that public confidence and to show that utterances that are made in the streets are one thing, but when it's time to actually bring the evidence that you allege you have, if it's not there, then that speaks volumes and should speak volumes to the electorate.